Hello, MangaMatt here, and I'm trying to make up for something I kind of promised last year, but ultimately I was not able to fulfill on it. And that was last year's end of the year wrap up awards recognition video. And this year I fixed it. So this year I'm going to be going through everything that I read that came out this year and was not a continuation of last year, barring an exception to the best continuing series, which is one of the categories I'm having for this. So again, just to reiterate, this is not including series that I have been, collecting from before December of last year. And of course, this is, I can only I can only, talk about the ones that I actually got. If there's something that I didn't get that you thought I should have awarded for it, let me know. Put it down, leave a comment, something. And again, all of this is purely my interpretation. But of course, because I am infallible, without flaws, and always right, of course, let's just begin. So first, before my official, list, I have before that some, I guess you could call these kind of gag categories, because they're ones that are 100% purely of my creation, and they're also somewhat kind of random, and may not necessarily have to do with anything in particular. First up, we have this is my Sad to See It Go award. And this is for a series that I've been collecting, and I am sad to see it completed because I would have loved more. That goes, of course, to Mobile Suit Gundam Origin, which ended its last volume of its reprinting last December. So exactly 1 year ago was the last volume of Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, which, again, this is gorgeous reprinting of a gorgeous series on the best quality of everything you could have asked for, and it couldn't have been for a better series to have it be done. This is one of the quintessential works of anime, manga, heck, of science fiction, period. It is the Star Trek of anime, mecha, Japan. Everything. It was a game changer. It's everything. It's 100% worth checking out and putting it in your collection wherever you can, however you can, or at the very least just reading it. I would say in a lot of respects it's superior to its original anime counterpart. I mean, there were, I'm not knocking the anime for anything. It was the first. It paved the way, but anybody who's looking back on it now will note that there are some limitations to the animation at certain points, especially in the later half. There were some compromises that were made for the sake of toy merchandising. The most obvious being the inclusion of the G Fighter as a additional support unit, and of course all of that is not at all present in Gundam Origin. And in fact, there's a lot of things that are added upon in Gundam Origin that have now more or less become canon to the official timeline, and rightfully so. They fit in perfectly and flesh everything out. Overall, sad to see it go, but like all things, it must come to an end. Except for One Piece, it will not come to an end. But for everything else, we can only hope that it ends well, and that it did. Okay, next up we have the WTF Award. This is the award I give to the manga that was most perplexing and most odd to read. And that definitely goes to Otherworld Barbara, Volume 1. Again, it's not... to add to the confusion, I'm not even... There's no listing to even say, like, if there... when or how the second volume is going to come out. I hope it does, because the only thing more confusing would be if we never got a conclusion to this. You have a story about a woman who killed her family, ate them, or ate their hearts, and then went into some kind of a coma. And then supposedly there are people that can dive into the dreams, and one such person is diving into Barbara's dream, and into this this other world, and then also there's supposedly aspects of the dream that are escaping out of it into the real world that are causing all kinds of weird cataclysmic things, and it's a very kind of stream of conscious story, and it's beautifully drawn, but it's a little more difficult to follow than some of Hagio's other works she's had. So I mean, there you go. There's not much to say. Let's see. Next up, we have Best Surprise. This is the one that I got on a whim. Didn't really know much going into it, and was pleasantly surprised by it. And that is What is Obscenity? The story of a good-for-nothing artist and her pussy. This is again the story of a woman. Rokuden Nashiko, as she's known, is a sort of artist, creator type, and she made a mold of her private parts, and she sort of molded into this kind of little caricature that you see here, and other forms of art, just using her privates to make it, and it was at one point that she made it, and she sort of did it up as a 3D printed software file that people who backed her Kickstarter for a certain project could then download it and could make whatever art they want with it. And it was then that she was arrested by the police under grounds of distributing obscenity, and she was then put in jail and had to fight her case on artistic merit, which it's just so baffling to think of. It's easy for us Western audiences to think that all the things that we take in of Japanese pop culture and stuff, that they're so open and very inclusive to weird and otherwise odd kind of things, and it's kind of like, if you're into it, you're into it. If you're not, whatever kind of thing. But no, that's very much not the case. If you take a gander at this, needless to say, it's very interesting to see kind of a window into another culture, especially how they view obscenity and how they deal with it. You could say anything you want to about what you like or don't like here in America, but to say that somebody would be put to jail because of distributing his or her art or form of expression privately, of course. I mean, there's certain limitations when it comes to displaying yourself publicly, but of course everything she did was not publicly done, and just the thought of that is just it was crazy. So that was definitely a surprise to be had. And next up here we have the MIA Award. I know this is a weird one, so let me explain. This is the Missing in Action Award for those manga artists that we wait and wait for another installment of their series and don't get it. And for this year in particular, there were, of course, a few contenders. I could have put, Togashi on here for his Hunter x Hunter series, but again, that's now gone into indefinite hiatus, I believe. Everybody wants to take a jab at Togashi for his Hunter x Hunter series. No, the one I put here is Kota Hirano's Drifters, which is more poignant given that Drifters has gotten a gorgeous anime adaptation done for it that's come out this year, and it's sad to think that people who are only familiar with the anime are going to be left holding the bag because there's not an end to this. There's no conclusion. There's no anything because if it's anything like Hellsing, you'll be lucky if he gets a volume out a year for this series, if even that. So, but to be fair, I think that a lot of anime fans nowadays are more willing to wait for the creator to produce more and then make a more faithful adaptation of that created content than to just either do filler or just come up with their own kind of ending or something. We're definitely not going to get any more of the like the 2003 Gonzo Hellsing anime treatment where they're gonna go as far as the manga went and then make some other crazy ending for themselves that probably won't be as good as when it actually ends proper. So that's my Missing in Action award. Definitely worth still picking up Drifters, even if it takes long times of waiting to get to the next part in it. Then next up, most disappointed or underwhelmed. This one goes to Kurogane, which again, it wasn't a bad series. But the fact that it features a robot samurai and does nothing with that idea or concept, it's like how you could not have built it up more and then let me down harder for that alone. I mean, he never fights with he doesn't get his arm blown off or something. He's never fighting like weird other cyborgs. It's never like he's having some kind of crisis about like what it means to be human or something. It does nothing with the fact that he's part machine or all machine. It does nothing with his weird talking sword. It does nothing with any of that. It could have been written out. He could have just been a normal dude, and the series would have lost nothing for it. It's a complete waste of an idea and a concept, and it's not even like with Lament of the Lamb, also done by him, where it was about vampires, but there was nothing vampire about it. It was definitely more of like kind of this tragic element to it, and definitely toning back on a lot of vampire ideas can lend itself to different kind of interpretations of the ideas. But at the core, it was still about the idea of them having to subsist on blood, therefore making them outcasts to normal society. Whereas here, again, nothing is done about the fact that the main guy, Jintetsu, is majority mechanical. So, that's all I have to say about that. Then we have Guilty Pleasure. This is the one that I am kind of ashamed to admit that I love, and I have a hard time really defending it for anybody. And that is Wounded Man by Ryoichi Ikegami and Kazuo Koike. This is like that old kind of men's pulp schlock kind of story where, again, if you're you know, feminism out the window here. You know, all the women are gorgeous, and they're all there to serve the plot for the male character, and you know, you know, the men are burly, and they're punching each other, and you know, they're also sometimes best friends to an almost absurd level. It's every kind of like men's adventure magazine, muscle man kind of story you could want. You know, if you put any kind of serious thought into the plots that go on here, you would say all kinds of things like, you know, he's obviously taking advantage of this woman. He's obviously, you know, treating her like garbage, and she just loves him for it and stuff. And you'd be 100% right, but I mean, damn, there's just kind of this enjoyment factor about some of the moments in here that I can't just, you know, if it was only that and there wasn't these crazy over the top storylines with him like wanting to, you know, get back at a porn industry for, you know, capturing him and his girlfriend, and he becomes the richest man in the world by sneaking diamonds into America, by smuggling them in an anaconda, and you know, he buys Trump Tower, and he buys his own football team that he then becomes the quarterback of briefly, and then he fights on a sinking battleship against former Vietnam vets just to settle like some kind of score with them. It's so insane to behold, and again, I can't defend it to somebody who really doesn't like some of the more questionable elements to it. So it definitely gets my guilty pleasure. More to show that just because I collect a lot of manga and read a lot of manga, that I don't necessarily have to always hold a high standard for some things. Sometimes it just works for you, and you know, you can point out the flaws all day long, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's just the entertainment factor that can surpass any problems that you would logically have with it. Alright, and then finally, the worst manga I read this year. And you may be saying, well, Matt, where is it? Where is the copy? I don't have it. So quick aside, I briefly had one of those free run subscriptions to Comixology, which is a you know, online comics reading app website that, you know, puts out comics and other comic related content on it for you to read. And Comixology Unlimited is a paid for service that allows you free access to several first volume trades and whatnots for various series. One such series that I got, I actually was able to read the first 3 volumes of it for free, and I despised it every volume I went into it. Shinji Ikari Rising Project, a Neon Genesis Evangelion spin-off series that is so far removed from what I could admit I enjoyed about the main series that it was just infuriating. It was like somebody just didn't get what was appealing about Evangelion. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things I don't like about Evangelion the series, the anime. There's a lot of things I don't like about it, and there's a lot of people that don't like Evangelion, and a lot of us, heck, a lot of us used to be big fans, and then, you know, over time we kind of find things out, like, you know, a lot of the religious symbolism is bunk, you know, the end of Evangelion can easily be interpreted as just, you know, a middle finger to the fan base, you know, and so on and so forth, all kinds of problems with it. But this series, just the first 3 volumes alone, there's no Evas in it. There's no mention that there probably will be Evas in it. Shinji and all the other characters, all the other Eva kids, they all still have their parents, and they're all perfectly happy. It's like, that was the main drama of a lot of these characters. Asuka's, tragic relationship with her mother, Shinji's tragic relationship with his father, the death of Gendo's wife, Shinji's mother. That was the whole driving force of Gendo even going through the extreme measures he did to start the Human Instrumentality Project. All of these things out the window. It's like it becomes just a typical high school romance story. This love triangle between Shinji, Asuka, and Rei, which was kind of sort of in the anime, but was heavily pushed aside to the main stuff going on, which was, again, the real horrific kind of implications of putting a 14-year-old in charge of a giant mech suit and being expected to save the world from imminent destruction. All of that out the window. Just chapter after chapter, volume after volume of just high school hijinks, and none of it goes anywhere. 3 volumes of nothing. And I even read the Evangelion Angelic Days. At least I can see the concept behind that. If you buy into that last episode of Evangelion where Shinji, he briefly sees a vision, I guess, of another parallel world where him and Asuka are best friends and they're going to school together, and this was kind of trailing off of that. But at least that had Ava's in it. At least that followed kind of the sense of the anime's spirit. This is just taking the characters and just making by the numbers high school Archie, Betty, Veronica stories. It's like if I did Mobile Suit Gundam, but there was no Gundam, and Amuro, Char, Sayla, Kai, and everybody was just in high school, and it was just them going to high school, and there was no nothing about Zeon, there was nothing about mech suits, about the new types, nothing. And it's like you've gutted the series of all the essence of what it means and what it is. It's almost baffling how far off the rails it went, and that is why it gets the worst stuff for the year. Now on to the awards proper. Alright, so with those sort of unofficial categories out of the way, now to get into the true meat of the various titles I've read this year. Alright, so first off, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise, I hope, those watching, that I'm not only a big collector and reader of manga, I'm also a big collector and reader of American comics, which honestly I didn't think would be that much of a unique kind of overlap. But the more I keep looking around and talking to various people from both camps, the more I'm shocked that there's still so very little overlap between those different genres. It's like with kind of how Marvel has been handling their properties, and the way a lot of the complaints that I always hear all the time about the lack of creative control in a lot of series, the vast shifting of creators and writers and readers to independent comic companies, Image, Dark Horse, and various other independent comic publishers are gaining a lot more recognized, are more recognized for their works and their quality than a lot of mainstream Marvel, DC comics are getting nowadays. If it wasn't for the license and marketability of their characters, I dare say that they would have been overshadowed years ago by those other companies, just on the quality of their storylines themselves, and that's the only thing that I think keeps them going. But again, that's a rant for another day, I suppose. So for these first two categories, they're somewhat interrelated to each other because of the various discussions I will have with people from both comics and manga fan and readers alike. So this first one here is is what I would suggest is the award for non-manga for manga readers, and that would be the Attack on Titan anthology, which this got a lot of publicity when it came out a few months ago, and I think it's still probably a really great get all on its own. It's a group of it's a large collection of European and mostly American comic book writers and artists who all come together to talk about or to weave some kind of story relating to the Attack on Titan series and property. Again, some of these stories are in canon, some of these are out of canon, some of them are just gag strips, some of them are just weird, and it really goes to show that there's this sort of there's a quality that a lot of American comic fans that love manga just as much as manga creators and writers love American comics, and honestly, some of the best stuff is when you get a blending of the two. Case in point, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I could definitely, and most likely will in a near future, go into detail about a lot of the Western influences that went into JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in their series. But regardless, I think Attack on Titan, if you're a manga fan and you want to see some non-manga related stuff, I mean, it certainly helps, being that it is related to an already existing manga property. But regardless, it still has a unique charm, and it kind of shows you, at least I suppose with kind of the way it's paced and panel layouts and stuff, kind of how how the same concept and idea would be done with American comic writers, I suppose, and also it would give you, I guess, some exposure to some American comic talents that you may not know about. Next up is then the reverse of that. This is a manga for non-manga readers, and of course, again, I'm making it a pretty easy target here, not going too far across the pond for it. This is Two Faces of Tomorrow by James P. Hogan and Yokinobu Hoshino, which again, it helps that it's an adaptation of a English novel, or I guess English as in it was written in English, like maybe it's American or British. I'm not familiar with James P. Hogan himself. I'm sure he's like a very well-known sci-fi author, like with Robert Heinlein and the like. But this is a really great sci-fi story, much in the vein of, I guess, maybe more of your 60s, 70s sci-fi, where there's still not a heavy emphasis on action like we would get in a lot of later sci-fi stories, and it's also not too, it's not too over your head like, say, Interstellar was. Like, that seems to be the two big kind of concepts you get with sci-fi nowadays. It's either like something trippy with a bunch of like time travel dimension stuff, and the other one, and black holes or something, and the other one is like things are worse in the future, something's gone bad, and we have to use guns and old American ingenuity to fix it kind of future. Which this is interesting in that again, it deals with AI, and with some fairly realistic I would say, some fairly realistic kind of predictions and ideas going into AI and how AI would operate. I think if you like John Carpenter's The Thing, or if you like a lot of those sci-fi stories where there's a lot of time really developing the sort of antagonist, like, you know, really detailing kind of how they're thinking and how they're growing and evolving into a problem, and how you see how it thinks, and then how the main characters are thinking to try and outthink it or thwart it. This is really great for that. None of the characters in here, I would say, are... There's no kind of idiot plot in here. Like, there's nothing in here that perpetuates itself because of an idiot doing something in it. Like, there isn't some scene where there's some guy and he I don't know, spills coffee on a console and it opens the door and that's how the monster gets out or something. There's no idiot plot convenience like that in here. Everything in here, I feel like it all happens for a purpose and for a reason, and everybody is very intelligent, and there are things that are all brought up and they all play a role there. It's just very well constructed, and again, Hoshino's art style is absolutely gorgeous. He's a guy that, you know, he was made to make, you know, architecture stuff. You know, his human figures they're okay. They're nothing amazing, but they're certainly not bad. They're good. It's mainly his designs for his spaceships and mechs and you know, satellites, stuff floating in space, stuff like that. Really great, and it's also a great introduction to a lot of his other sci-fi stuff. Which, even though he didn't write this, he was a perfect pairing, because the stuff he actually did write, all of that is very much in the same kind of vein as this. So I definitely recommend this to any of them, you know, after you finish reading that. Alright, next up we get the Best Non-Fiction Manga Award. This one was kind of a no-brainer, of course, if you're familiar with my predilection to a certain manga creator, and that is the Osamu Tezuka story. This is, again, a massive tome detailing the more or less the entire life story of Osamu Tezuka, the godfather of manga, the forerunner of anime, everything that is Japan, and anime and manga and all that goes with it. This is the man that revolutionized all of that, and you really get a good idea of how he thought and how he experienced things. It's not too personal because it's not an autobiography. Everything that's detailed in here is, of course, from interviews, you know, quotes from family and friends, and otherwise just, you know, date dropping, and a list of dates and milestones in his career and such. But you really do get an interesting look at just how passionate this man was to you know, create not only a new style of manga, which was the story-based manga, which would, instead of just a few chapters and it's done, he would try to weave it into a big, long, sort of novelesque tale. And of course that would lead to, you know, all the other stuff, and then, you know, his breakout into trying to make animation inspired by the likes of Disney, and there were a few like silent movies that he watched that I think he said also inspired him. I can't remember their names. Just, he loved movies. Every day he said he would try to watch a movie. 365 movies a year. First of all, I can't even imagine sitting and watching 365 movies. That's absolutely insane to think about. I'm not even sure if we even get 365 movies a year anymore. And this was back in like the early you know, the 1930s and 40s, which I'm sure, you know, movies that didn't have huge budgets back then, and you know, it probably did spit them out that often. I mean, you know, I don't think I ever turned into the I don't think I ever flipped through the Turner Classic Movies channel and never really see that many repeats, I can imagine. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating, all the work he put in, all the achievements he did, the things he inspired, the people he inspired, and all that. And also on top of that, it's a very affordable price. You know, it's only 30 retail. You get that cheaper online for like over 900 pages here, and it's well drawn. I think it's really fantastic. Then another big thing I always try to push for is you know, best is something that kids will like, because I think that especially nowadays there's just a lack of push to put stuff out there that kids will like, and that are a lot of times for kids. And that's not to say like to dumb down or baby down like, you know, more adult works or anything like that. I mean, something like Pixar, I would say, is a perfectly good kids movie, but I would say no one would say that it's a bad movie for being a kids movie, or that, you know, it's trapped by being a kids movie or anything like that, you know. But and especially because it's like what Stan Lee would say: if you get a fan, if you get a kid as a fan, then you get a fan for life, because that's where that's the part that you actually start influencing, I think, a lot of what kids will eventually grow up to really like or enjoy, you know, reading or checking out. And you know, that's again why I think that there's such a decline in, you know, the comics and manga and all of that now, is because of the lack of really targeting something that kids will really like or enjoy or want to pick up. And you know, you know, the mentality of DC and Marvel wanting to cater towards like 20 and 30-year-olds, that's not sustainable. You're not gonna get new readers who've never picked up a comic before in their 20s and 30s to suddenly want to pick up a new comic. I'm sorry, I know 20 and 30-year-olds. We're not that spontaneous. So with that in mind, this is my #1 pick of the year for kids and all ages, which is the Super Mario Adventures. It's tons of fun. It's just the kind of thing that kids would want to pick up. I mean, you know, I could be a purist and say that, oh, manga needs to be right to left. Well, you know, kids don't really understand that kind of mentality. So you know what, if you want a kid to pick up and read something, just go ahead and flip the artwork, you know, because you know, kids are, you know, if you do give a little bit of compromise to a kid, they're gonna go the other, they're gonna fill in the rest of the gap there. If you make it easy for the kid to pick up and read, they'll probably pick up and read it, and they'll probably like it. Also, again, really helps that it's in gorgeous coloring, gorgeous, you know, high gloss paper. It's really big, fun to pick up and read. You know, what I could imagine, say, like a parent sitting down with story time with their little kid, you know, flipping through and reading it like here. And again, it's really fun. It does a lot of neat little panel jokes here, especially like right here with Mario and Luigi. They think they're about to get killed by this caterpillar and Yoshi, but you know, they realize, oh, the dinosaur's friendly, and becomes their best friend kind of thing. And I think it's really fun. It's just like you would expect a true Super Mario comic to be like. And it's something like this that kids are gonna want to read. You know, I think everybody out there has a good idea of the Super Mario Brothers. So, you know, kids would look at this, they recognize Super Mario, and the best part of all, it's not bad. You know, it's really easy to make a cheap cash grab, but, you know, when you can see a cheap cash grab that's good, you know, go for it, I say, yeah. And next up here we have Best Horror. Again, this is a no-brainer. This could actually be kind of a contender for one of my favorite series of all time. This is Frankenfran. It's again, it's got a lot of the same kind of humor, but again, it also helps too that Fran does a lot of like body or biological experiments on people and stuff, and you know, I have a background in biology, so it was very refreshing and fun to read all of these ideas and concepts that she was using for all of her various experiments and ideas, and just how ludicrous she would get with all of these ideas she was working with. It's really so much fun to read about, and it's on the one hand, it's kind of sad to know that there's only one more volume of this that's gonna come out, but then at the other hand, like, I wouldn't want to maybe run it in the ground probably, but it's a lot of weird, disturbing, kind of gross out horror in here, but it all has this fun kind of twist ending, like Tales from the Crypt, and I think that it's the kind of horror, like that kind of sort of tasteless horror that you just don't see much anymore. Like just scientists making a giant mutant bug that goes and kills people. You just don't see that anymore. It definitely draws a lot of fun from like 50s B movies and the like, with Robot Man and stuff, and Fran herself, who just will do anything for a buck, and she just will also sometimes like not think something through when she does an experiment. She's just so much fun as a character. Really, really great. Then next up, Best Action, and this one, you know, again, maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but I would say that Haikyuu is Best Action, and of course by action I mean anything that has action in it or is driven by action in the plot. Yeah, it's a sports manga, but I would still say that a lot of the action and the dynamic poses that they do when they get down to the volleyball play is absolutely fantastic. Just a lot of high energy with you know, hitting the ball back and forth, and also I was surprised by how you know, sucked in I could get with something like volleyball. It's something that's almost never really brought up a lot in sports culture here in the States. You know, people talk about volleyball, but you do get this, by reading it, you do get the idea that, yeah, it's almost 100% team-based. There's no real room for a star player to really stick out. Everybody on the team has to work together in 100% cohesion. It's not like baseball, where baseball, it's like, well, the most amount of teamwork you get in baseball is when you're an outfielder or when you're on the bases. You know, batters don't really employ any kind of teamwork, you know, unless you go into a lot of statistics and, you know, you get into the whole thing about, like, the batting order and stuff, I suppose. But, like, it's not quite the same as, like, you know, people having to coordinate with each other passing a ball. And not only passing a ball, but, you know, by volleying it to each other and the like. And I think it's just got some great action and great suspense in it. Then, let's see, next up, this is Best Single Volume of the year. And this is the reason why I didn't put him on, this particular artist, on the MIA award, because even though he wasn't working on his signature series much of this year, regardless of how popular it has exploded with a new adaptation and a new video game come out for it, he at least did something this year. So he's at least got a leg up on Kota Hirano, who I saw all of Jack Nothing from, and this is Giganto Maxima. This is every bit as fun as you could imagine. A sort of Mad Max, Ultraman, Pacific Rim kind of story. You know, a guy in this, you know, a muscle man and this little weird kind of girl who are sort of roaming through this desert, and they you know, come across all kinds of giant monster creatures that they have to try and fight, and they come across this one small little desert town full of people who have kind of become partially modified to be kind of like insect people, and they're being attacked by this other group, and you know, they have to, and you know, the one muscle guy, he has to sort of bond with this little girl to become this giant monster thing and fight, and it's just as absolutely wonderful as you think it is. You know, Miura's art style is just so wonderful and so much fun. I can't not love every page of this series. Just the way he does the sort of cross-hatch detail work, and you know, it's sad that he could have been doing Berserk instead of this, but at least it was something. And who knows, maybe there's a weird possibility that somehow these two series are connected in some way. But if you only had to pick like one single volume of manga to pick up and read, I would definitely at least make this one of them from Dark Horse. Then next up, best continuing series, and you know, there's a lot. These last two entries were of course the hardest ones to really pick out, because of course there was a lot to choose from in both, especially best continuing series. You know, that gives me I gave myself the opportunity to pick anything I thought that was a good continuation of their series from the previous years going, and I had to pick the one that's I guess getting, you know, a second season so far, and just one that when it comes out, I always get engrossed in it, and it always perks me up to read, and it's always usually the first thing I have to read, and that's Ajin, the Demi-Human. This is one that, you know, it's fairly, you could easily say that it's kind of a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure clone, because the way that they fight the IBMs are very much like stands. They operate on very similar kind of, you know, stand-esque kind of mentality, but I would say that there's still, and the uniqueness of the fact that the humans themselves that use the IBMs are also immortal, and just the fighting of these characters in this one building that's the current arc so far, it's so intense, and the villain, he just keeps coming up with Sato, he just keeps coming up with different ways of getting through various parts of the building, you know, reusing and using new kind of weird ways how to make his immortality to his advantage, that it's just like they spent so much time trying to disable the IBMs that he uses that the person himself, the user, is every bit as much of a danger and a threat as anything else. Just either one of them, you know, this unkillable, unseeable ghost thing that could rip you apart, or a guy who himself is unkillable and regenerates constantly, both would be an impossible thing to try and fight against, but together, that's even more fascinating. And, you know, that's why I had to give it up for Ajin there, for some great almost horror-esque kind of action and suspense. And so here we arrive at the best new series that I read this year. And thinking it over, you know, there was of course a lot that I could have went with, but you know, I had to think of which one I really loved reading the most, which one am I more likely than anything else going to stick with to the end of it, and you know, just everything I love in manga, everything that I think that they could be, and the kind of fun it can have, and art style, all of that included. And you know, it was, if you'd have asked me at the beginning of the year if I would have picked this one, I would have probably said, nah, there's no way it could have been that one, but I did. And you can boo me or whatever. I'm sure some people are not going to agree with me on this, but for my money's worth, best new series of the year for me was Princess Jellyfish. The characters are so much fun. Tsukimi, she's just this kind of shy girl that has her weird nerdy obsession with jellyfish, and how she uses that obsession to then be something more than just a hobby, and be something that she can actually engage in and be creative with is just so much fun. And all the characters are so fun and over the top and memorable, and you keep thinking, like, where are they going with it? Where are they going with it? And the whole time I can't predict any of it, and I want to find out more, and that's why it's so much fun. The artwork is so much fun, with how well things are drawn, and how it can be the same character and she can draw them in completely different ways based on how their hair is being done, how they're whether it's raining outside, whether they have makeup on or not, and you feel like they're a completely different person, and how much fun they can all be with each other, and just how over the top a lot of their personalities are. I think that, you know, on the one hand, I would say, like, it's not for everyone, but I think that it's at least worth giving it a shot to try. You may, like myself, the first time I checked it out, I remember I was in college, and people would bring in, you know, various first episodes of series to see which one we all wanted to agree to watch later, and I couldn't help but bash this series so hard based on just its first episode alone. And so revisiting it, you know, years later, and realizing how hard I was and how I was not giving this series a chance, you know, I probably would have loved it a lot more if I was just in a better frame of mind, you know, just wanting to, just the idea that, you know, just because a series is just because, like, I'm a man and this series is not aimed at men doesn't mean that I can't enjoy this for what it is, and still get involved with the characters and the drama and all the crazy fun it has in it. So again, I can't believe it either, but that's what I'm going with. That's what I'm sticking with, and and of course, all this is just what came out this year, or what I picked up from Volume 1 for this year, is what I'm going with. If it was something that came out in a prior year, and I missed the chance to talk about it then, I'm not gonna do that. You know, I'm just picking up whatever was in the manga updates is the only ones that I was deeming eligible for this list, and that was just to keep it at least current and to give a new kind of fresh take on kind of what I was thinking, rather than just, you know, make everything be like, I don't know, One Piece or something every year, over and over. But again, that's what I picked, and you know, every year I always think that I'll not have enough variety or different series to check out to really complete a list of like this or something. Even this year I was surprised that I was able to find fairly good choices for each of the categories I made up for myself, and here's hoping that I'll still continue to get good choices for the years to come. So that's all I got for this year's collection, and I'll see you with the next update in January, which will cover February, which will cover my December-January manga update. So there you go, and I'll see you next year.